The Battle of the Atlantic was not decided by speed. It was decided by endurance. In 1942, the German U-boat was the ultimate predator. It was sleek, invisible, and lethal. It could travel thousands of miles to strangle the lifelines of Great Britain. Against this high-tech shark, the Allies deployed a weapon that looked, quite frankly, ridiculous. The consolidated PBY Catalina. To the pilots who flew it, it was the cat. To the Germans who feared it, it was a slow-moving shadow that refused to go away. Some called it the flying whale. It was slow. Its top speed was barely 190 miles per hour. It was unpressurized. Crews froze in the Arctic air. It was ungainly. It looked like a boat that had accidentally grown wings. But the PBY had one advantage that mattered more than speed: time. It could stay in the air for 24 hours. It could fly 2,500 miles without refueling. It could hover over a convoy like a guardian angel, forcing the U-boats to stay submerged until their batteries died and their crews suffocated. This is the story of one specific PBY Catalina, a plane with the bureau number 2459. While other planes were shot down or scrapped, BuNo 2459 became a legend. It flew through the worst storms in the North Atlantic. It hunted the wolf packs off Iceland. It became the only U.S. Navy aircraft in history to single-handedly sink 3 German submarines. And it never got shot down.
To understand how this lumbering giant became a killer, we must look at its engineering. The PBY wasn't just a plane, it was a flying apartment block. The fuselage wasn't a tube, it was a boat hull. It was designed to land in the open ocean, which meant it had to be strong. The pilots sat in a glass greenhouse high above the water. Behind them, the flight engineer sat in the pylon, the structure connecting the wing to the hull. He monitored the twin Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines because the pilots were too far away to see the gauges clearly. Inside the hull, there was a navigation table, bunks for the crew to sleep in shifts, and a galley to cook meals. In the waist, huge blister windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean, perfect for spotting the tiny featherwake of a periscope. But its greatest weapon was its wingspan. At 104 feet, the wing was massive. It provided so much lift that the PBY could carry 4,000 pounds of depth charges or torpedoes and still loiter for an entire day. This endurance terrified the U-boat captains. A Spitfire or a Mustang had to go home after a few hours. The flying whale would just circle and circle and circle.
The legend of BuNo 2459 began in the frozen waters of Iceland, August 1942. The plane was assigned to Patrol Squadron 73, VP-73. The base at Reykjavik was grim. The weather was a constant enemy. Fog, icing, and gale-force winds grounded most aircraft. The morale was low. The squadron commander had even closed the officers' club, the bar, until someone sank a U-boat. On August 20, BuNo 2459 launched on a patrol south of Iceland. The pilot was Lieutenant Robert B. Hopgood. The weather was foul, but through the mist, the lookout spotted a shape. It was U-464, a milk cow, milk shoe, supply submarine. These were the most valuable targets in the Atlantic, because they refueled the attack boats. U-464, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Otto Harms, was caught on the surface. But Harms didn't dive. A milk cow was heavy and slow to submerge. Instead, he manned the deck guns. This was the moment of truth. A slow PBY against a surfaced U-boat bristling with 37mm and 20mm anti-aircraft cannons. Lieutenant Hopgood pushed the nose over. The PBY screamed, or rather rumbled, into a dive. The German tracers reached up. They punched holes in the Catalina's wings. They smashed the glass in the cockpit. Hopgood held the line. He didn't drop from high altitude. He came in at treetop level. At the last second, he released his depth charges. The stick of explosives straddled the U-boat. The hydraulic shockwave cracked the pressure hull of U-464. The submarine lost power and began to sink. The German crew abandoned ship, jumping into the freezing Atlantic. As Hopgood circled the dying sub, he realized he had done the impossible. He keyed his radio and sent a message back to Iceland that became Navy legend. It wasn't a code, it was 4 words. Sunk sub, open club. BuNo 2459 had drawn first blood.
Most aircraft would be retired after such damage, but 2459 was patched up and sent back out. Less than 2 months later, on October 5, 1942, she was in the air again. This time, the pilot was Chief Aviation Pilot Michael Luke. They were escorting convoy HX-209. The convoy was being stalked by a massive wolf pack, a group of U-boats coordinating their attack. The PBY's job was to force them down. If a U-boat dives, it is slow. It can't keep up with the convoy. But 2459 found a target that refused to hide. It was U-582, a Type 7 attack boat. The weather was atrocious, high seas and low clouds. The U-boat commander thought the storm would hide him. He was wrong. Chief Luke used the cloud cover to stalk the submarine. He cut the engines to idle, drifting down silently like a glider. When the U-boat lookouts heard the engines roar back to life, it was too late. BuNo 2459 dropped 4 depth charges directly on the conning tower. There was no surfaced battle this time. The U-582 simply disintegrated. It was blown into shrapnel, taking all hands with it. In the span of 6 weeks, this single airframe had destroyed 2 U-boats. It was becoming a lucky charm. Crews fought to fly it. They believed the flying whale was invincible.
By 1943, the Germans were adapting. They had installed METOX radar detectors to hear the Allies coming. The PBYs needed a new trick. They got one: FIDO. FIDO was the code name for the Mark 24 mine. It wasn't a mine, it was the world's first acoustic homing torpedo. It didn't need to hit the sub directly, it just needed to be dropped near it. FIDO would listen for the sound of the U-boat's propellers and steer itself into the engine room. On June 24, 1943, BuNo 2459 was now flying with VP-84. The pilot was Lieutenant Joseph Beach. They spotted U-194 south of Iceland. This was a duel of technology. The U-boat saw the plane and crash dived. The captain, Wolfgang Kelly, thought he was safe. He was under the water before the plane could line up a depth charge run. In 1942, he would have escaped. In 1943, he was doomed. Lieutenant Beach flew over the swirl of water where the sub had vanished. He didn't drop depth charges, he dropped FIDO. The torpedo hit the water and began its search pattern. The crew of the PBY circled and waited. Suddenly, a massive geyser of water erupted from the ocean. Debris, oil, and wreckage shot to the surface. BuNo 2459 had become the second aircraft in history to score a kill with a homing torpedo. 3 kills, 1 plane. But while 2459 was hunting in the north, another group of PBYs was about to change the war in the Mediterranean using an even stranger technology. While BuNo 2459 was fighting ice storms in the North Atlantic, another squadron of PBYs was sent to the warm waters of the Mediterranean to solve a seemingly impossible problem: the Strait of Gibraltar. This narrow choke point was the gateway for U-boats entering the Mediterranean to attack Allied supply lines. The water was deep, the currents were fast, and standard sonar didn't work well there. U-boats could sneak through by riding the currents silently, engines off. The U.S. Navy's solution was VP-63, nicknamed the Mad Cats. They were equipped with a secret weapon that looked like science fiction: MAD, magnetic anomaly detection. It wasn't radar, it wasn't sonar. It was a sensor mounted on the tail of the PBY that detected the magnetic field of the Earth. A 700-ton steel submarine is a massive magnet. When a U-boat passed underwater, it warped the Earth's magnetic field slightly. The MAD sensor could feel this distortion. But there was a catch. The MAD range was tiny, only about 400 feet. To find a sub, the PBY had to fly suicidally low,
50 to 100 feet above the waves, in pitch darkness.
Detecting the sub was one thing. Hitting it was another. Standard depth charges fell forward due to the plane's momentum. If you dropped them while flying directly over a sub at 50 feet, the bombs would overshoot the target every time. So the engineers invented the retro bomb. These were small, rocket-propelled depth charges mounted backwards on the PBY's wings. When the MAD operator saw the needle jump, he pushed a button. The rockets fired backwards with exactly the same speed as the plane was flying forward. The physics canceled out. The bombs stopped in midair and fell straight down, vertically, directly onto the submarine's hull. It was a perfect trap. The U-boats never knew what hit them. They would be running silent, deep underwater, thinking they were safe from radar. Then a PBY they couldn't see would drop a bomb that didn't splash until it hit their steel skin. On February 24, 1944, a VP-63 PBY used this method to destroy U-761. The crew of the U-boat surfaced, stunned. They had no idea how the Americans had found them without pinging sonar.
In the Pacific, the PBY found yet another role, the Night Raider. Painted entirely matte black, these black cats roamed the Japanese shipping lanes at night. They didn't just hunt subs, they hunted everything. They carried radar, bombs, and .50 caliber guns. Because the PBY was so slow, it could fly tighter circles than any Japanese night fighter. If a Zero tried to attack a black cat at night, the PBY pilot would simply turn inside the fighter, forcing the faster plane to overshoot. They became pirates of the air. They would land in enemy lagoons to rescue downed pilots. They would taxi up to Japanese fishing boats and capture the crew at gunpoint. The PBY proved that in a war of high-speed technology, there was still a place for a plane that could simply outlast and outthink the enemy.
What happened to our hero plane, BuNo 2459? After the war, most PBYs were scrapped. They were melted down for aluminum pots and pans, but 2459 survived. She was sold into civilian life. For decades, she worked as a survey plane, flying over jungles and deserts, her war record forgotten. In 2008, she was rediscovered. Historians checked her serial number and realized this is the sub-killer. She was the only surviving PBY with 3 confirmed U-boat kills. Today, she's being restored to her wartime glory. When you look at her, bulky, slow, covered in rivets, it's hard to imagine her diving into flak off Iceland. But she is a physical reminder that the Battle of the Atlantic wasn't won by sleek jets. It was won by flying boats that could stay in the fight longer than the enemy could hold their breath.
The German U-boat commanders feared many things. They feared destroyers. They feared the cold. But their diaries reveal a special hatred for the flying whale. A destroyer could be heard. A fast plane would eventually run out of fuel and leave. But the PBY Catalina was relentless. It was the eye that never blinked. It proved that air power isn't always about speed or altitude. Sometimes it's about loiter time. The PBY Catalina didn't win the war by being fast. It won by refusing to go home.